Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to today's Play Attention webinar. My name is Gwen Sorley, and I will be your host today. I really do appreciate you taking some time out of your day to learn a little bit about how to assess attention and executive function. Just a couple of things to mention before we get started. One is that we are recording this event, so tomorrow you'll receive the replay link in an email, and that will just allow you to share the webinar with any friends or family members or staff members who were unable to attend today. So also we are going to be interacting hopefully quite a bit today. So please do use the chat box whenever you have questions or comments, because your interaction and your comments really do enhance everyone's experience. So today we are talking about assessments, which are tools that provide insight and direction. And many of you are here today with a specific goal, or maybe you have questions or concerns. So that's our very first interaction. Let me know in the chat box, why are you here today? What piqued your interest? Are you interested in learning a little bit more about your personal attention or your executive function? Are you concerned because you don't feel that you're as productive as you should be at work or at home? Does procrastination play a role in your life, and you really want some strategies on how to improve your ability to initiate tasks? Go ahead and type in the chat box now. Why are you here? What are your questions? What are your goals or objectives for being here today? Maybe you have a child and your child is struggling academically, although they're very intelligent. Perhaps you're looking to help your clients improve executive function. So Josephine says that she is here because she has been struggling with perfectionism and procrastination at the same time. Okay, good, excellent. Josh says that he is here because I'm sorry, I got to scroll down here, that he is concerned about executive function and also his ability to stay on tasks that are related to work. Excellent. Noreen is here because she has clients who have struggles in attention, task completion, impulse control, and working memory. Very good, very specific. Elaine says that she has been diagnosed herself as ADHD, but is seeing some of those characteristics in her grandchildren, and probably her son also had ADHD when he was growing up. All right, so there are a lot of feedback here of why you're here today, and your goals, why you're here, what you're looking at, and what you're concerned about. So assessments can really be helpful, but although you've typed in many of the areas that you're concerned about, right? Some of you are concerned because you want to work on task initiation or improve procrastination. They want to not be consumed by perfectionism. A couple of you said that you're looking at improving executive function for yourself or your children or your clients. So you've typed in some areas of concern. So if you know the areas that are a concern for you, then do you really need a test to confirm that? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Why would we take an assessment if we already know the areas of concern? So I think it's important to keep in mind that assessments can provide us with a lot of insight, which can then lead to determining which path to take. Because many of you here, I think it was Josh who mentioned that he wants to improve attention. There were some others who mentioned they wanted to improve executive function and working memory. So let's say that you want to improve all of those areas. What path do you take to get there, to make those improvements? Do you simply stay the course, don't make any changes, and just hope for the best? Do you take the path to the left, which may include some accommodations or some strategies? Or do you take the path to the right, which may includes some accommodations and strategies, but also skill building. It's important to know that assessments are there to provide certain insights so that we can then determine the best course of action to, of course, reach our end goal. And many of you brought up that you want to improve executive function, and that is our final destination here. What we're talking about is to determine your strengths, those areas of weaknesses, areas that you want to improve in order to reach that final destination, which is improved executive function. Now, many of you here are familiar with that term, but you can think of executive function as kind of like the CEO of your brain. It's what allows you to control your attention, your behaviors, your emotions. It allows you to plan and prioritize, organize, avoid procrastination, and remain on task. So it's actually a set of mental processes that allow us to get things done every day. And it's important to remember that no one is born with strong executive function, but we all have the potential to develop it. And that development starts right after birth and continues through our mid to late 20s. Unfortunately, and you may be seeing this with some of your children, unfortunately, we expect everyone to have strong executive function by the time they hit middle school, right? By the time they're 11 or 12, we expect everyone to be independent and organized and self being able to self-regulate. And that development doesn't always naturally happen. There are a lot of factors that can inhibit that development, one of which is ADHD. So it's important that we take a step back. We remember what we know through neuroplasticity, that the brain is moldable, it's shapeable. And if we provide you with the right tools and the right challenge, the right path, then we can create these new neural pathways that are required for executive function. So, if that is your final destination, assessments can help you determine that path. Assessments help you determine both strengths and weaknesses, can define clearly the problem areas, and indicate the severity of those weaknesses. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind because sometimes I'll be working with clients and they'll say, well, you know, I know my son has a very difficult time completing his homework after school. I know it's a 15-minute assignment, but it's taking us 2 or 3 hours. So is it really that task completion is that severe, or is that just an 8-year-old being eight? So, and you may even think about that for yourself. I've worked with clients, adult clients, who have said, I never really considered myself as having difficulty in these areas. I thought this is how everyone functioned. I knew I was working really hard at work, but I assumed everyone else was working just as hard to organize and stay on task. And so sometimes it's nice to have an assessment, especially a norm reference test of attention or a norm reference test of executive function, so you can really see where you fall, where you lie when you compare yourself with that performance of your peers. It can let us know which areas are simply just an 8-year-old being eight, or simply something that people typically struggle with, or is it a problem of concern that we can really make a plan of action around? So that's really an important key part of assessments. Allows us to develop that plan of action, and it also provides a baseline to document progress, right? Because if you have all of this information and your final destination is here, we want to look at our progress over time. And if we take that pre-evaluation, then it gives us kind of that baseline, that starting point where we develop the plan. And you can see this within our program, Play Attention, where we oftentimes assess your particular needs, whether that's your needs or your child's needs or your clients. We assess the areas that are challenging now but required for executive function. We put that into your customized plan. So we have that baseline, that starting point. And then once we get to about the halfway point, which within Play Attention is about 20 hours of training, we're going to do the assessments again. Because when you do the assessments midway through that plan, then it allows you to really see the growth that's been made thus far. It can allow us to then modify the plan. Are there things that we need to add as objectives? Are there some things that are not working the way we thought they'd be working? Do we need to adjust that? So it really gives us that mid evaluation where we can adjust the plan. And then, of course, at that 40 hours within play attention, at 40 hours, we're usually looking at graduation. And so we do want to determine, have we reached our goal? Have we reached that final destination? Is it time to graduate? So no matter what course you're taking, assessments will allow you to make that plan and then document progress along the way and determine if that plan is working or if it needs adjustments, modifications, and when we have reached our goal. Now, when we talk about ADHD or weak executive function, we all know that attention is just the tip of the iceberg, right? There are so many other areas we need to keep in mind, areas that we want to improve along with attention. So that might be processing speed, impulse control, emotion regulation, working memory, auditory processing. There are all of these other cognitive skills that we want to improve when we talk about improving attention and executive function. So we have two different assessments that we can use in this process. One is called the focus assessment, and the other is the brief assessment. I personally like using both of them in conjunction because the focus assessment is more objective, whereas the brief assessment is more subjective. And so let's get into those a little bit closer and a little bit more in depth. So if we look at the brief assessment, the brief assessment is a behavior rating inventory of executive function. So this is that subjective assessment. It is based on your observation and your experiences around executive function on a day-to-day basis. So you should plan on this assessment taking approximately 20 minutes. And since it is a questionnaire, it can be done online from your home or your office, and it is designed to evaluate executive function from multiple perspectives, which is always so interesting. So if you have, let's say, a child who you would like assessed, then we can have the teachers fill out the brief assessment, and you, as mom or dad, can also take the assessment, fill out that assessment form. And that will allow us to see your child's executive function while at school and also at home. That allows us to really look at a comprehensive plan. Also, you can do self assessments if you are, of course, an adult. You would evaluate yourself. And if you have a child who is 13 years old or older, it's appropriate for you to have your child to fill out. And, I always find this so interesting because I was working with a mom not too long ago, and she had a 15-year-old son. And so she filled out the brief assessment and evaluated her son, gave her thoughts, and then she had her son fill out the report. And when we got back together for the feedback session, because we will need, if you do either of these assessments, we'll need a good block of time, usually about 40 minutes, to review the results with you. And so when we were looking over the results, I said, did you realize that your results or your evaluation of your son and his own self-evaluation were almost identical? You both rated all of these different areas almost exactly the same. And she was really surprised about that because she said, I didn't even know he realized there were any issues, that we were struggling at all. And so that was interesting because if you have a teenager right now, when you ask them, so how's everything going? Are there any areas you're struggling in or want to improve? The typical answer is, no, I'm fine. Everything's great, right? You don't get a lot of feedback. But when we actually gave her 15-year-old son time to reflect and asked these questions, he was able to reflect and really give a good assessment of his own abilities and pinpoint some of the areas he'd like to improve. And that really opened the door for them to have a deeper conversation about these areas and what we can do to help him so that he doesn't have to work so hard. So, really interesting. So, again, this is appropriate from any age from 5 all the way up through adulthood. And it gives us a snapshot of your executive function on a day to day basis. So, it is going to look, and we're going to get scores in all of these areas of executive function, which is really important. That's why the brief assessment is so important if your final destination is improved executive function. We're going to get this baseline of where you fall or your child or your clients fall in all of these areas. So we look at inhibit, that's your ability to control your impulsive behaviors, whether that's acting without thinking about consequences, or if your child is constantly rushing through their work just to get it done, that's a lack of inhibitory control. So we're going to look at that area. We're going to look at self-monitoring. How well do you evaluate, or how well can you determine how your behaviors are affecting others? Shift is that ability to make the transitions. Maybe sometimes you find that when your child is involved in an activity that they're really enjoying, and then you say, okay, we have to leave, we have to get on the road and get to school, they have a really hard time making that transition. Or maybe you find that in yourself as well when you are really maybe even hyper focused on a certain project, and then you have to transition to go to work or pick up something at the store, and you have that really hard time transitioning. We're going to look at that. Emotional control or emotion regulation. Do you have difficulties with big emotions? Initiate. We touched on that earlier, where a couple of people said they have a hard time with procrastination. Are you able to initiate tasks? Task completion. Once you initiate the task, are you able to sustain your attention on that task until completion? We look at working memory. Working memory is an area that is really challenging for a lot of individuals. It's that ability to hold information on your mental sticky note in order to complete a task. And then also how to plan and organize. So if you're planning and organizing, that you're able to take a large project and plan that project out. Task monitoring is your ability to monitor your own progress as you're working on a specific task. And then, of course, organization of your materials. How organized is your space? So the brief assessment gives us an evaluation in all of these different areas. So I just wanted to give you an example of a couple of questions. There are several questions asked in a variety of ways, but these are just samples of a couple of questions from the brief in regards to working memory. So one question is, I have trouble concentrating on tasks such as chores, reading, or work. And the response here was often. So the other question was, I have trouble with jobs or tasks that have more than one step sometimes. So these questions go on, and you will rate yourself, or like I said, your child or your clients, and we'll be looking at the end result. And at the end, we'll get that full report in all of these areas. This is just a couple of example questions. So when I'm looking at a specific client, and this was student A. And so there were one or more areas of concern at the end. I got a full report, and it told me that student A's concerns are noted in the following scales: inhibit, shift, emotional control, working memory, and planning and organization. So that allowed me to then take a full report, a comprehensive report, and kind of narrow down which mental processes within executive function are areas of concern. Then it also tells me the strengths. Otherwise, student A's abilities are appropriate for his age on the following scales: self-monitoring, initiate, task monitoring, and organization of materials. And that's always so important. We want to look at areas of concern, but we also want to keep in mind those strengths because you do possess so many strengths. And when we make that plan, our plan is designed to improve, yes, all of these underlying cognitive skills that are challenging so that we can enhance all of the positives. And so it's really important you keep your positives in mind. I work with so many adults who often say to me when I ask them what their strengths are, they tell me that they no longer remember what their strengths are. And so it is so important that you take a moment to really reflect because the strengths are still there. It may be easier to look at the things that you are struggling with, but the strengths are there and we want to always keep them in mind for our plan. So based on what we saw that that client or that student A was struggling in the area of working memory. So this is just an example of that action plan, that path we're going to take. And I always like to take the path to the right, which is a combination of accommodations or strategies along with skill building. And I'm going to get into that a little bit deeper in just a moment. But I think that gives you a more comprehensive approach to improving executive function. So here, this is just an example of an accommodation we might make. Since this individual is having a hard time with working memory, then the way information is presented should be altered. So for student A, we may need additional time to process the information or time to rehearse new or novel information. So, you may be an educator here, or you may be a parent, and you give your child a lot of information and you expect them to absorb that and store it in memory and then be able to um, take action. But you have to keep in mind if that individual has challenges in the area of working memory, we have to maybe give them an additional amount of time to process the information. You may have to repeat the information a couple of times, do those reality checks, ask them to give that information back to you, and so that they're able to rehearse new information. So, those are important strategies. But while we put those strategies in place, we also have to get to the root cause and start developing skills. So we can incorporate, this is our play attention home screen, and you can see I starred auditory processing and working memory because these are two specific skills or cognitive exercises I want to put into this individual's plan so that while we make these accommodations, we're also doing actual skill building. Okay. Now, we'll also look at the focus assessment. And the focus assessment is a norm reference test of attentional control. It takes about 20 minutes again, and it gives us an overview of your performance compared to the performance of your peers. So it is computer based and it is a very low stimuli type of activity. So when you're doing the focus assessment, you're going to see either a solid star or a star outline. If it is a solid star, then you have to push the space bar as soon as you see it and only one time. If it's a star outline, then you will actually not push the space bar. So it is a very low stimuli and it is a task that takes 20 minutes. So we're going to see how your attentional control is on a mundane task for a prolonged period of time with some distractors as well. And when we get to the end, we have four different constructs of attentional control that we look at. We look at consistency, which is actually the quality of your response. We look at performance, which is the accuracy and the speed of your response. We look at impulse control. Were you able to control your impulsive responses during that time? And we also look at your ability to deal with distractors, both auditory and visual. So we're going to look at all of these different areas and we're going to compare your performance to the performance of your peers. So I do want to share with you one of our younger clients. This is Kara, and Kara did this assessment when she was just 6 years old. So she was younger, but this assessment is appropriate again for anyone from 5 years old all the way up through adulthood. So here you'll see there's a blue line, and that's where her individual result is. Now, the purple line, with the light purple being below the norm and the dark purple being at the norm. So, what we want in our training is that we want to actually move that blue line above that dark purple. So, we really want to move it up so that she is, at least, and I can't see because I'm covering this with my we want to get to about 59% or higher, right? In the end. Right now she's at 24%. But whatever plan we make, we want to shift that improvement to above about 59%. We want it to be a little bit higher than that end of the dark purple line, because as she ages, that line is going to move over. That norm group is going to move further to the right. So when we looked at her consistency, she fell in that lower group, the lower norm group. She was at 24%, so she was below the norm. And if we look at what this means in the classroom or at home, it means that oftentimes she has a hard time starting and completing tasks, right? So if you are someone who you're struggling with your child starting and completing tasks in a timely manner, that's what we're talking about here. And maybe not just your child, maybe you yourself as an adult have a hard time with task completion. We also look at consistency in that one day your son knows all of his addition facts, or maybe all of the spelling words for Friday's test. One day he knows every single one beautifully, and then the day of the test, it looks like he's never seen any of those words. So it's that inconsistency of performance that we're looking at here. And you may see that in your own abilities as well, that you may be able to do a certain work task beautifully one day and then struggle with it the next. So we know that she fell lower than the norm in the area of consistency. So our end plan will be, again, a combination of accommodations and also specific skills within play attention to do that skill building. So if she's struggling with the area of consistency, then we might break up long assignments into shorter assignments and provide her with some breaks. But simultaneously, we have to develop skills. So within play attention, we're also going to work on attention stamina, time on task, and academic bridge. And if you have not yet seen play attention in action, keep in mind when you are working on attention stamina or time on task or academic bridge, you are wearing our body wave armband. On the back of our armband, there are 3 sensors. And when you slide that armband on your arm, we're monitoring your brain activity that tells us how attentive you are. And then that information is given over to the computer where you're allowed to control all of the cognitive exercises just with your mind, or more specifically, your attention alone. And you receive constant and immediate feedback as to whether or not you truly are focused and paying attention. And that's a really important first step in the learning process because right now, for many individuals, attention is very abstract. But in your skill building, we're going to make it concrete and controllable. So no matter what you're working on, whether it's attention stamina or time on task or working memory, you have to be paying attention. If you're not paying attention, then the activity will stop or the character will go in the wrong direction, and you have to focus back in order to continue. And the reason we do that is because we know the very first catalyst necessary for brain change is attention. You can have a great teacher, you can have a great life coach or counselor, but if you're having a hard time paying attention to that individual or the process, then it's hard to get maximum benefit. So that's why we make certain that no matter what you're working on, you are actively engaged. So that is the power of play attention, is that we're going to allow you to work on these cognitive skills. We're not going to just simply give you a series of brain games or brain training apps. We're going to give you cognitive exercises that are all powered by your attention alone. So now, which path do you take, right? It's really important that we take all of that information that we get from all of the evaluations, the assessments, and determine that path. Because when we look at assessments, and I have a lot of individuals who will come to me and say, we had a neuropsych evaluation done, which is great. I have 23 pages worth of information, but now what do I do? What do I do to improve these areas? So that's the end goal. Which path are we going to take? And as I mentioned, when we're looking at our final destination of executive function, there are all of these different areas, all of these different mental processes that we want to improve, right? But none of these are just one thing. They're a combination of cognitive skills that we need to improve in order to improve all of these mental processes. So that's why I said earlier that I do, when we're determining the strategies or the path for you, the plan of action for you, then it's important that we do the combination of accommodations and strategies, but also skill building. Because if we just look at one area of executive function, we just look at, let's say, emotion regulation. And if you go to the web, and here I just went to ChatGPT, our friend Chat, and I put in what are the strategies I should be using for improving emotion regulation? And these are common strategies that came up. And I'm sure many of you have talked about them or tried to use them or discussed them with your child. And you know these and you've tried them. But for some reason, they seem limited. Have you tried breathing slow and steady? Have you tried the one strategy that is name it to tame it? Have you tried physical activity or to change the story or use your senses, right? Take a moment to list 5 things you see and 5 things you can smell just to regroup and control that emotional reaction. I'm certain most of you here, and you can use the raise your hand icon if any of you have tried these, but you have found them to be limited in how successful they are. And that's because in order to really use these strategies effectively, we have to simultaneously develop those skills. Because you can give me all of these strategies, or you can give your child or yourself all of these strategies. But in order to use these strategies for emotion regulation, we first have to improve your ability to pay attention to the entire situation. We have to improve your processing speed so that you're able to process all of the information. We have to improve your impulse control so that you're not just impulsively responding with the first emotion that comes to mind. We have to improve your ability to stay mindful so that you can calm the internal dialogue and stay in the present moment. We also have to improve your working memory. So, in the heat of the moment, you can draw on prior experiences. You can remember all of these different strategies in order to evaluate the best response. So the strategies are good. We want you to have those in your toolbox, but we have to simultaneously develop skills. So that is why it's so important to have a comprehensive approach when making your plan. And the assessments will help us do that. So when you think of your final destination, we have to remember that all of these mental processes within executive function are not just one thing. There are specific cognitive skills that we can address and strengthen in order to improve all of those areas. And we can do that within play attention. And then bear in mind that there's always that end evaluation to determine if you actually reached your goal. Did you improve executive function? So I want to share with you Kara's end evaluation. Remember, in the area of consistency, she was at 24%, and we said we were going to want to move that up to about 59% or higher. Actually, when we did the end evaluation after that 40 hours of training, she was at 88% consistency. That is so important to remember that we can make these changes. We talked about neuroplasticity earlier, that the brain is moldable, it's shapeable. And if we provide you with the right tools and the right challenge, you can create these new neural pathways. So we see she went from 24% all the way up to 88%. That's huge. That means, what does that look like in the real world? It means when she's given a task at school or at home, she's able to start that task right away, keep her attention just on that task until she completes it, that closed end tasking. It also means she's consistent. When she learns information or executes a task, she's consistent from day to day in her ability to do that task. Now let's look at her impulse control, because she was very impulsive. You can think of consistency as a positive construct. So the higher the number, the better. Here, impulse control is a negative construct. So actually, the lower the number, the better. She started at 88%. She was 88% impulsive when taking that pre-evaluation. And in the post-evaluation, after her 40 hours of play attention training, we got all the way down to 1%. So that is so significant. She's now able to control all of those impulsive responses. So I hope this overview gave you a better idea of how important assessments can be, and maybe gave you a new perspective, a new way to look at assessments and how to approach them, and what you can actually glean from those assessments, and what you can do from that point forward in order to help you reach your goals, because that really should be the clear path. We should have those assessments provided in order to decide, do I stay the course? Do I take the path to the left or the path to the right? So now we can help you find that path. If you would like to either do either one of those assessments, if you're interested in the focus assessment or the brief assessment, we can do those with you. Both the focus assessment and the brief assessments, they are $50 a piece. And at the end of the assessment, we'll receive the reports here, and then we'll need about a 45-minute block of time to review the results with you. And with this webinar special, you will actually get a special offer, which is if you purchase one of those assessments, you will get the other at 50% off. So buy one, get one at 50% off. If you want both the objective assessment and also the subjective, and then we'll use that information to evaluate your strengths and weaknesses, and then we can discuss a plan that may be best for you or your child or your clients. So if you are interested in doing a focus assessment or a brief assessment, just type assessment in the box, in the chat box, and we will make certain to follow up with you and help you get registered for either the focus or the brief or both, okay? And you may just have additional questions about the assessments. We can do that with you. So if you are interested in either more information about the assessments, or if you would like to go ahead and register for the assessments, just type assessments in the chat box. If you feel like you don't really need an assessment because you've already done assessments in the past, or you simply just want to discuss your specific needs, type consultation in the chat box, and we will make certain that we follow up with the consultation calendar so that you'll be able to schedule that. And if you simply want more information on play attention, I do encourage you to attend next week's webinar. If you haven't already attended a play attention webinar in the past, next week we're going to be talking about how you can improve executive function and stop working so hard. So if you would, go ahead and type in the next steps you would like to take, whether that is an assessment, or the consultation or the webinar, and we will follow up with you in order to help you with those next steps. If you just have some questions you want to type in the chat box and you'd like us to follow up with you, you can just type in your questions and we'll be certain to follow up with you in a timely manner. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's webinar, and we look forward to seeing you in a future event. Take care.